One of the greatest undertakings of the technology world is not based in bottom lines and maximizing profits, but instead focusing on how we can reshape society for the better. Our next speaker is a renowned thought leader that has rallied innovators worldwide to change society as we know it, revolutionizing how we think about food, transportation, art, and more. Joined on stage by the co-founder of the Knowledge Society, Nadeem Nathoo, please welcome Vinod Khosla.
Vinod Khosla, the best mentor to have is someone who has seen and overcome it all. Enter Vinod Khosla, investor, entrepreneur, technologist, and mentor. When he penned the world-famous essay, Reinventing Societal Infrastructure with Technology in 2018, it became the gold standard for how entrepreneurs should think about disruptive innovation. Now he's chasing the next wave of innovation, nurturing young entrepreneurs looking to use tech to make a positive impact on society, making him one of the world's most qualified experts on what comes next.
So many colors to your misery. I think it's time to share an epiphany. The
Right.
very things that you hate the most are the ones that I don't.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah, how's everyone doing? I'm super pumped for this. Vinod, are you there?
I'm here.
You can't see the audience. There's a couple hundred people here, but you've been here twice before, so I think hopefully you remember what the vibe's like. The energy is definitely in the room.
Yes.
Okay, well, super excited to have you here.
Great vibe.
Yeah. Okay, so we only have 22 minutes. I'm told we are very strict about this. So I was hoping we could start off with something fairly familiar to you, and they kind of mentioned it in the video. So you are known for supporting people and projects that are near impossible and beyond the reasonable, right? And so this is what we want to focus the conversation on today. No politics, no COVID, no financial markets. Unless we want to go there, we can go there. But what I wanted to start off with was reinventing societal infrastructure using technology. You wrote this 5-6 years ago. Can you briefly explain the exercise that you went through to do this, and what the implications are of this body of work that you've written?
Yeah, so I did this after I turned 60. I'm 67 now. And said, if I'm going to spend the next 20 years of my life, and it's still the next 20 years of my life, 7 years later, working on something fun and interesting and impactful, what would it be? And I thought I might find an area or two. But what I was really surprised at, as I looked broadly, that there wasn't an area of non-governmental GDP one could not reinvent with technology. That could be hundreds of percent or thousands of percent improvement compared to what we have today. The way I look at the planet, 700 million people on the planet have a rich lifestyle. It's rich in energy, rich in housing, rich in healthcare, rich in education, rich in entertainment, rich in transportation. You get the idea. 7 billion people want it. And to get there, we would destroy the planet if we did it linearly and the way we do it today. And that necessarily means we have to look at things differently. The only thing that can multiply resources by hundreds, if not thousands of percent, is technology. So I got focused on technology-based reinvention of societal infrastructure, from public transit, which we're working on, to fusion reactors, which we're working on, to all kinds of healthcare and medical devices. So very, very excited. I got so excited after I looked at it that I'm all charged up. I'm like a kid in a candy shop today as I look at this. And I still go back to this 50-page document I wrote about 5 years ago.
It's so good.
Almost, and this is to your audience, no matter which area you like or are experts in, it is open to radical innovation with technology.
So if
and it doesn't matter whether it's food or energy production.
So if any of you are ambitious, you're interested in the future of innovation, highly recommend reading this document. It is pretty much the Bible of 10x thinking, and he breaks down pretty much every single industry and comes up with specific hypotheses on how we can 10x the GDP from this particular area. Can we throw up the slide, Elevate team, that I had prepared? Vinod, let me know if you can see the slide. Our buddy Mark Andreessen tweeted this 2 years ago. It's a slide, you might be familiar with it. Can you see it? Anything on your screen?
I can't see it, but
Okay. It should be coming up soon. But essentially, it
Yes.
maps a bunch of different industries and how technology has impacted these industries. Hopefully you can see it now. Most of these industries are deflationary, which is the point of technology, right? Better, faster, cheaper. But there were some industries in particular that have been inflationary, meaning we haven't figured out a way, necessarily a meaningful way, to be able to crack these. Broadly speaking, it's been health, housing, and education. Wanted to get your thoughts, Vinod, on why you think over the last couple of years, especially since you wrote this doc, we haven't seen as much progress meaningfully applying technology to these three sectors.
Well, the first thing I tell the audience, all of this is hard. It's not easy. I would say disruption is fun for the disruptor. It's very not fun for if you're the one being disrupted. So the thing to keep in mind is there's strong forces that resist change. The American Medical Association won't even let a registered nurse practitioner in most states in America, at least, in the US at least, prescribe an antibiotic for an infection. Why? Because they want the $150 physician visits revenue. It is sad, but disrupted institutions resist disruption. We've seen this in oil and gas industry. Almost every industry resists disruption, so it's our job to make it so much better, 10x or 100x better, that we can overcome the resistance barrier. I will tell you it's possible in all of these areas. In education, we're working on AI tutors. That's a non-profit effort. If anybody's interested in, I'm pretty excited about it. We're working on AI-based physicians. That's a very hard effort again. Even the regulations don't allow it today. But my hope is within 5 years, we can have approved apps that are primary care physicians or oncologists. Transportation. We have a public transit system we are designing that's more than 10x better than every public transit option and substantially better than Uber or your private car in every way, not just in some ways. So as crazy as it sounds, public transit is open to reinvention. We are 3D printing houses that will be 80% lower in carbon footprint and hopefully cheaper per square foot. So no matter which area, of course, proteins, plant proteins to eliminate hopefully 50% of the land area under agricultural cultivation. That's a beautiful goal and very achievable, but resisted by many, many standard interests.
And again, for those of you in the audience, he's mentioned probably less than 10% of his portfolio companies here. If you are interested in learning more about this, if you go to the Khosla Ventures YouTube channel and you scroll to about a month ago, he has a video. It's a 20-minute video, Vinod, where you talk through just quick fire all of these portfolio companies that are in the room. And it's crazy because if any one of those companies are successful, it's going to dramatically change the world. So if you watch that video, 20 minutes, you will be living in the future. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm very proud of this video. I cover 80 companies in about 25 minutes.
It's wild.
And it's all our entrepreneurs, not me, but all our entrepreneurs who are going after changing the world in every domain you could possibly imagine. Hermes do Mach 5 aircraft, London to New York in 90 minutes, Conval Fusion doing fusion, rocket labs with rockets in space. No matter where, Wabi is a great Canadian startup. Corbett is a great education startup building AI tutors. So I cover 80 companies. If you want to understand your portfolio, that's the video to watch. If you just want to be motivated, I get motivated watching what our entrepreneurs are doing. I would add, any of you that wants to do that kind of disruption, email us. Call us.
And this is a really good segue into my next question, Vinod, because one of the things that you talk about is these problems are hard to solve. And so we can't guarantee solving these problems, but what we can try and do is getting more shots on goal. Have you thought about what are some ways in which, whether it's through Khosla Ventures, yourself personally, or other institutions that are trying to get more people to work on some of these hard problems versus working on like Uber for bartenders and Yelp for dog food just because they're more familiar with those problems maybe?
Look, first, everybody has to contribute at the level they can contribute, and everybody can do a little more than they think they can do. And so I urge everybody in the audience, no matter what they think their expertise is, to stretch your thinking a little. The single biggest thing that can help you stretch your thinking is role models. So look to role models around you in Canada or in the US or worldwide, and say, what can I do in my space that's equally radical? You know, Shopify is a great example out of Canada. Unfortunately, we were not investors. We were investors in Square. But it did a lot for small business. That's a good example. But by and large, what I've seen, if I can be really honest, is you can turn, and I see often because of the wrong kinds of investors turning a great idea into a decent one at much lower risk. So by and large, people will increase the probability of success, reduce the probability of failure, but also reduce the consequences of success. I think the kind of thinking I'd encourage is, it doesn't matter what your probability of success is within reasonable bounds. If the consequences of success are consequential. When we invested in Commonwealth Fusion about 5 years ago, we helped incubate the company. Bob Mumgard was essentially a fellow at the MIT Plasma Fusion Lab when I met him. There was no company. I said, it doesn't matter if the probability of success is less than 10%, because the consequences of success are essentially free energy around the world. It changes society, it changes water, it changes so many other things that it's worth taking that risk. You know, Impossible Food was the same way. When Pat Brown approached me, first, there was no company. He was just a professor at Stanford, had never been anything but a professor at Stanford, never had a real job outside academia. But when he explained his mission of changing how agriculture and meat production is done, affecting 30 to 50% of all usable land area on the planet by replacing meat with a plant protein, I said, this is too important to not try. And that's how Impossible came to be. It was a $3 million financing. It wasn't some massive thing, but it was definitely worth trying. In fact, it was too important to not try. And I could say that about a lot of our ventures. And that's the kind of thinking I'd encourage in your audience. And I'd encourage them to look to role models who've been ambitious and say, why couldn't I do this?
But before we get to the next question, just want to ping the Elevate team that I don't actually have a timer. So before we get to Jacob's section, if you want to ping me if we're running out of time, because I have a bunch of questions here, and I'm sure Vinod and I can go on forever. But it's almost like you're reading my questions, because where I wanted to go next was CFS and this idea of placing big bets on fusion. So a hot topic today is energy independence. right? And I'm not going to talk about why, because we said we're going to stay away from politics, but energy independence is a hot topic. And we've seen a lot of progress, especially from a cost per kilowatt hour perspective in the last couple of years. And fusion itself is one of those things where maybe there's a low probability of success, but Vinod mentioned that if you are successful, it's very, very consequential. It pretty much, it solves, quote unquote, climate change and saves the world, right? Now, they've raised around $2 billion to date, Vinod, whereas the incumbent for fusion, which sounds even funny to say, ITER, the International Global Project for Fusion, raised $20 billion. And it feels like CFS and others, including ZAP and Helion, have been able to do 10 times more almost with 10 times less. Why do you think this is the case? And we see it time and time again.
The key to, so first, I think it's important to realize, and I will say this and be political, we are and will be in a techno-economic war with China. And it will be Western values between Chinese values. And I think of that as a good thing, because the more competition there is, faster technology will progress. So I don't think of it as a bad thing, but a realistic thing is the Western world, if it wins this technology war, or if China does, their political philosophy will prevail and influence the rest of the 7 billion people on the planet. And I hope we win. But either way, if both succeed, China and us, it'll be a good thing for the planet. But it is a techno-economic war, and let's not fool ourselves. Let's not be polite about it. So, if fusion works, it really not only solves climate, it's an important political force and an economic force in many, many other areas that depend on it. I was looking at a glass maker in Italy, and they said these glass furnaces to make houseware glass are shut down now because of energy costs. So they're not actually blowing glass. So your little tumbler you buy for your home, they're not making those in Murano, Italy. So these have large implications. I'm sorry I wandered off. But these are worth attempting. And what Commonwealth Fusion has done in 3 years, they've caught up with 30 years of ITER project. And by the way, most of that $2 billion is still in their kitty. They've used trivial amounts of that. So
Exactly.
it's not raised, but used that matters. But they've literally achieved their magnet performance in 3 years that has taken ITER 10 years. And they think in 3 years, they will achieve positive fusion, more energy produced than used, which is a target for ITER in 2035. So it takes bold ideas to do this, and it takes ambitious goals. And the fact that Helion has a very different approach and there's a dozen other startups, to me is a really good thing, because if one fails, others won't. I would say at this point, I guess there's far greater than a 50% chance that Commonwealth Fusion will produce working fusion reactors within reasonable timeframes. And their plan, which I love, is to replace every coal and natural gas plant in the country by 2040, which experts would tell you is not possible. But I always say experts never did them possible. They don't think linearly. Skeptics never did them possible. Experts are mostly wrong. I've written extensively about it.
Yep.
Every expert figured there were fewer cars in 2030, electric cars in the US in 2035 than Tesla achieved in 2016. So I could go on about experts. Just don't listen to them. Listen to their objections, because they're important to understand why they think things won't work. But don't accept that as it's time to give up.
All right, so I'm getting pinged by the Elevate team to move on to the next section. There's so many places that I would have wanted to go. You know, the debate between solar and nuclear, identifying non-obvious problems. Nitricity is a really interesting one, which pretty much creates fertilizer
I
from
love
thin air.
that cool
It's
idea.
insane.
I'm gonna describe it. You know, fertilizer.
Sorry,
is
Elevate team.
critical yeah, sorry, Elevate team.
My bad.
Fertilizer is one of the largest inputs into agriculture, and it's still produced with the Haber-Bosch process from the 1800s, the late 1800s, early 1900s. Nitricity is attempting to produce it, and I won't tell you they'll be successful out of thin air. Only a solar power plant, water and air produces nitric acid as a fertilizer. It's too important to not try again. Let's go on to the next section.
Okay, do we have time for Jacob, please? So that we have a 16-year-old TKS student who wants to ask you a question. He's working on something pretty groundbreaking. Can we please bring him up for 2 minutes just so he can ask this question? All right, kill it.
So, hey Vinod, I'm 16 and I'm super passionate about the future of personalized medicine. And specifically, I'm working on predicting which proteins will transport drugs into people's cells based off of their primary gene sequences and using a support vector machine learning algorithm. For an idea like that to work, I obviously need easily accessible gene sequencing, which I'm hoping one of your portfolio companies could help out
You know,
with.
with a company like Ultima, it'll be $10
Yeah.
in a few years. $10 per 100 gigabase pairs, which is about 100 times cheaper than today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping that a company like Ultima could help out with that. But another thing I would need for my idea to work would be for cellular diffusion to be disproven. Because basically my idea relies on active protein transporting all of the drugs into the cells. Mm-hmm. And that brings me to my question, because active protein transport, cellular diffusion, whether it happens or not, has some controversy within the biology community. There's lots of argument about whether it happens or not. And my question to you is, given that active protein transport, doing all the transportation of drugs into a cell, is only a theory so far, to what extent should somebody like me take this project, given that there could be barriers in execution and technology, but even bigger barriers in scientific backing?
I don't think with reasonable steps you'll have barriers in scientific backing. Experts may foo-foo it, but I will tell you it's absolutely worth pursuing with one caveat. Don't bet on the one mechanism you've thought of today. Think broadly. So I will give you the good news. Just this morning, I had a long conversation with a Nobel Prize-winning biochemist.
Of course he did.
About completely different ways for this kind of diffusion to work, whether it's peptides or RNA or interference RNA or messenger RNA. So you may not end up with the mechanism you think today, but if it's a problem worth working on, and you keep a very open mind and a non-religious approach to what will work, it's definitely rewarding. Just this morning, I had this really exciting conversation on this very topic.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Vinod. The audience here, I know, loved it. Hopefully we can have you at Elevate again next year in person. All right.
Great.
Thank you, Vinod.
Glad to be here.
All right.
Thanks.